And I feel like there are a lot of people who maybe agree with us that animal testing is really cruel, but they really honestly believe that it's necessary and it needs to be done. But there isn't a lot of proof of that, and I want to explain why that is, so that we can address that when people bring it up with us. So this is a monkey named Britches, and Britches was blinded when he was just a baby, and he had his eyes sewn shut, and he had a sonar device implanted in the back of his head. And the idea was that we're going to try to see if Britches can figure out his way around the world using sonar, like a dolphin does, rather than being able to see. And to me, this is a pretty good example of like why animal testing is stupid. Because why do we need to do that? Why do we need to see if a monkey can use sonar? I mean, you know, it boggles the mind. And basically, most tests that are done on animals are this pointless. They are this stupid. Here's another example. I did a protest one time at a chiropractic school. You know, guys know chiropractic, where they like adjust your spine and stuff like that. At a chiropractic school that was testing on rats. They were doing tests of chiropractic procedures on rats. Rats, I don't know if you guys know this, they have 4 legs rather than 2, and their spines go like this rather than like this. What can we possibly learn about human spines by testing on rats who have a very entirely different spinal cord than we do? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. And most animal testing is like this. I read about another study where in England they took pigeons and they implanted electrodes in their heads that they could control using a remote control device. And they basically figured out a way that they could like control the pigeons and where they flew by sending information into those electrodes in their heads and stimulating different parts of their brains. I mean, what are we going to like build an army of remote control pigeons? Like, why are we doing these tests? It doesn't make any sense. But that's just one problem, is that the tests are like pointless and ridiculous. Another problem is that the vast majority of tests that are done on animals are repeats of tests that have already been done, where we already know what the results are, we've already learned anything that there is to learn from these tests, and they're just being done over and over and over again, basically so some researcher can get paid, and that they can publish an article in some scientific journal that all the other researchers who also torture animals can read, and they can all feel good about themselves, and they can feel like they're earning their paychecks. But it's not actually doing anything good for the world. So, you know, they're going to say they'll take one chemical and they'll drip it into the eyes of, say, 50 rabbits, and then they write their paper. And then some other researcher will take the same chemical and drip it into the eyes of 25 rabbits, and then they write a paper. And then another researcher will take that same chemical and drip it into the eyes of 100, you know, mice, and then they write a paper, etc. Like, we know what the chemical does, we understand what the results are, we don't need to keep doing these tests over and over and over again. And the vast majority of tests, particularly the ones that are performed in universities, are repeats like that of tests that have already been done, and there's no more information to be gained from them. So, the other problem, in addition to being pointless and repetitive, is that animal testing is unreliable. So, how many of you guys in this room have taken either aspirin or penicillin? Right? How many of you guys are like really glad that you were able to take that drug at some point because something bad might have happened to you if you weren't able to take it? I mean, I can say that for myself. If we relied exclusively on animal testing, nobody would have ever taken either of these 2 drugs, because aspirin kills cats in laboratory settings, and it causes birth defects in almost every other laboratory animal that's commonly used. Penicillin is poisonous to guinea pigs, who are, you know, so commonly used in testing that there's like a whole phrase about it, you know? If we relied on animal testing, we would have looked at these drugs and said, oh no, it's going to give everybody birth defects and kill them if they take it, so we can't approve it. Obviously that wasn't true. So if we only relied on animal testing, we wouldn't have these 2 drugs. The problem with animal testing is that animals' bodies, while in a lot of ways they're very similar to ours in terms of their ability to feel pain, their ability to suffer, they're also very different from our bodies in a lot of very meaningful ways. They react to certain chemicals differently. They have different, you know, like I was talking about with the chiropractic school, their bodies are just structured differently than ours. And what happens to them is not necessarily what's going to happen to us in these types of environments. A perfect example of this is that we have been able to cure cancer in rats and mice for like 20 years, 25 years at this point, which is great. Like, that's a fantastic scientific breakthrough, but it hasn't taught us anything about how we can cure cancer in human beings, because obviously we can't do that yet. Yeah, there we go. So I look at it like, if you want to learn how to fix a car, like say you're studying to become an auto mechanic, you work on cars. You don't go out in your backyard and play with like bicycles and lawnmowers, and then think that, oh, now that I know how to fix a lawnmower, I'm going to be able to go fix a car. They're two totally different machines, two totally different engines. They're structured entirely differently. Animals' bodies and our bodies are basically the same thing in terms of being different from each other. Their bodies are very different from ours, and we can't necessarily learn anything from studying their bodies that we can apply to our bodies. The last thing I want to say about animal testing is that there are just so many alternatives available to animal testing in the 21st century with all the technology that we have available to us. Basically, there are computer models that can simulate both human and animal anatomy. So there are computer programs where you can say, what's going to happen if I drip 25 milligrams of such and such a chemical into a rabbit's eye? And the computer can tell you what's going to happen, and we don't actually have to go and do it to those poor rabbits. We can also look at chemical models that can simulate the interactions between drugs and our bodies, or our drugs and animals' bodies, and we can see, using basically a test tube type of situation, what the chemical reaction is going to be like, rather than actually have to do it in an animal's body. And when it comes to things like diseases and cancers and so on and so forth, we can do what's called epidemiological studies, which is basically a fancy word for studying populations of human beings. Not studying them like cutting them open, obviously that wouldn't be okay either. But studying, what it's like for them. We can look at people who do have cancer and observe what it does to their bodies, and see how certain treatments help them or don't help them, and actually help people who have these diseases directly, rather than spending all this money, all this time, all this energy trying to work on animals. We can actually just apply that money and that research directly to people who need it. So animal testing is pointless and repetitive. It doesn't work. And there's no need to do it because we have all of these alternatives available. It's also extremely cruel to the animals involved. So in the 21st century, there's just simply no need for it.